Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm just getting myself organised here. I've been pretty busy the last few weeks actually, running group workshops here, and I'm getting set to go off again this coming week. Beyond that, I've got a bit of a road trip coming up which I'm really excited about, but I won't talk much about that on this video. That is still to come. You know, it's interesting. I've been talking to a number of people recently, and I get this question asked quite a bit. And they say to me, what is the most important ingredient of your Nightscape images? And you know, sometimes I'll talk about the gear that I use, and sometimes I'll talk about the locations that I go to. In fact, one of the things I'll often say to people, the most important thing is composition. What is it in my scene? And so I think today what I might do is just briefly talk about that a little bit and hone it down. But the best way that I can possibly illustrate this point is to show you some images. So I'm going to do that in just a little bit. But before I do that, well, I've got to continue packing up my bits and pieces here into the car. I've got all sorts of stuff here. I've got lights, tripods, as you can see, star trackers. I mean, I take so much stuff out there sometimes to the farm to run these workshops. I get myself into trouble because I don't need all this gear. You know, that's one of the things that I would say to people, you don't need all the gear to take a decent Nightscape photograph. And you know, I've got all the gear because, well, let's face it, this is what I do. This is my life, this is my job, it's everything. So I've got to keep myself up with all this stuff, but I don't need it all the time. I sometimes don't use the tracker, sometimes I don't use the lights, I don't need to. Pretty much always need a tripod. That's one of the prerequisites for the long exposure photography I do. But anyway, I'm digressing. Let's get back on the subject. You know, one of the things that I think is really important to work out what the most important aspect is in our Nightscape photography is actually to get away. So, you know, it's easy to sort of get into a routine and just do the same things every time we go out there. But what I like to do is go away. Now, road trips are one thing. That's a big thing, and I love doing those. But I can't always be on a road trip. But, you know, sometimes just one day away, even if it's during the daytime, and this is a bit of a clue and a bit of a hint as to what I perceive to be the most important factor for Nightscape photography. So what I like to do is to get away, jump in the car and just drive and look for locations. Now, I mentioned a bit earlier that I perceive composition to be one of the, if not the critical factor for shooting any type of photography, let alone Nightscape photography. And this is an important fact. So what a lot of people do, and I see this all the time, and in fact, I have also done this. So I'm not criticizing anybody because I do this as well. And that is that for some reason, we sort of think that Nightscape photography has its own set of rules when it comes to taking photographs. And that is not the case. I mean, if we're shooting in the daytime, we look for good light, we look for good compositions, we look for leading lines, we look for all sorts of elements in our foregrounds and all sorts of things like that, and we set up our camera and take the shot. But for some reason, people at night time think, oh, I just want to get a picture of the stars, and oh, who cares what's in the foreground? Oh, there might be a tree down there, but I don't know. So we sort of cut corners, and I don't think that is the way to approach our Nightscape photography. And so there you go. My hint to what I perceive to be my most important factor is the foreground. There it is, I've said it, the foreground. And that's why I jump in the car and I will spend hours literally driving around the countryside looking for subjects to shoot. Now, it might be trees, it might be old buildings, it might be old wrecked cars or machinery in a paddock somewhere. And you know, if you follow my channel, I shoot this stuff all the time. The key factor here is that the sky does not change very much. Now, you're probably saying to me, hang on, the sky changes a lot during the course of a year. Well, yes, it does progress across the sky, and it does come at different angles depending on what time of year we're shooting. But let me tell you this, I can tell you now that if I look for the Milky Way tonight on this particular date, I can tell you that the Milky Way is going to be in exactly the same spot at this day next year, and the year after, and the year after that. And in fact, in 20 or 30 or 50 years, it is still going to be in that same spot on this day of that particular year. Now, I can go back in time, history, and say 4, 5, 6, 10 years ago, there it is. And after a while, I get to know where the Milky Way is going to be in the sky and the stars. Now the moon and the sun, planets, they move separately to that, as we know. But the actual constellations in the sky are always in the same place at the same time of year, which makes it pretty easy for us to actually compose an image knowing exactly where the sky is going to be. So here is me driving around the countryside looking for foregrounds and something that I can incorporate into my shot. But hey, for me, it is far greater than trying to incorporate something into the shot. In fact, I would go as far as to say that what I am actually incorporating into my nightscape photography is, in fact, the night sky. Yeah, you heard it right. I am shooting foregrounds and incorporating the night sky. So what that actually does, it turns this whole thing on its head, and I am suddenly not thinking so much about the stars, but I am thinking about the foregrounds. Now, isn't that a different way of approaching the subject? Now, okay, I am by no means minimizing how difficult it can be sometimes to shoot the stars. We're limited with shutter speeds, we need things like star trackers, and we need all this other gadgetry to get a decent star shot. We need good lenses, we don't want coma and aberrations and all sorts of things. So yeah, of course, we have to think a lot. We have to learn a lot about shooting the stars. I get that, and that's why this can be so difficult. But for me, it is all about the foreground composition. And from there, I will do my very best to incorporate the Milky Way or some part of the night sky, whether it's Orion or the Magellanic Clouds or the Southern Cross, whatever it may be that I want to shoot. That becomes the canvas behind which I have my foreground subject. Now, I want you to think about that. And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to show you a collection of images that I have shot over the years. And I can say to you right now that every single one of these images is all about the foreground. And so there you have it. All of this stuff that I do with all the gear that I have is primarily aimed at getting a decent composition of a foreground landscape subject with a gorgeous Milky Way galactic core or whatever it may be that I'm looking for at that particular time of year in the background, which becomes the blank canvas. So you can see my mindset here. Now, it doesn't matter what I'm shooting, I'm always thinking that way. And to be honest with you, that is the reason why I don't really get into deep space astrophotography. I love looking at that stuff and I really appreciate the talent and the commitment that's required to shoot that, but it's not for me. Why? Because it doesn't have foregrounds. It doesn't connect to the landscape. It doesn't connect to the trees and the old buildings and the things that I love so much. Anyway, thanks so much for watching this short video. I hope it's been somewhat motivating for you to get out there and have a look for yourself to see what else you can find. In the meantime, have a fantastic week. I'll come back to you pretty soon with some more adventures out there under the stars. I'll see you later.